All right. I just wanted to set up very quickly that this panel, what I really think is so important about this event today is, I mean, we as a community are focused on juvenile crime and the horrors over the past couple of months like never before. And this day of action, instead of just talk, is so critical. And the panelists you see here are the ones on the front lines. And although it's a multi-layered and complicated issue with a lot of tentacles, what's happening now and where you'd like it to go as far as juvenile justice specifically and moving the needle?
What we have found is, and what the studies have shown, is that kids who stay in school and who obtain even the most minimal reading education level are less likely to fail. But why is that? Why are they less likely to fail? Is it because they're in school and they are out of trouble? Or is it literally because they can now read? And it's really both, because it attacks the root of the problem, which we find to be a level of hopelessness amongst the affected youth. They feel forgotten and they feel hopeless, they feel trapped where they are, and our programs are designed to reach out in a mentoring way, whether it be through reading programs, direct mentorships. We have, for example, Project Century, which is directed specifically at juveniles and trying to show them the hard impact of what it is to join a gang. Things like Peace Ambassadors, where we actually recruit some of our best and brightest youth to actually become leaders and help change the mentality of the potentially affected youth. So it's through these programs that, while we don't prosecute juveniles or juvenile offenses, we feel very vested in the community through this outreach program.
The state attorney's office, it's our responsibility to prosecute any juvenile who's a juvenile less than 18 years old. So any juvenile who commits a crime against the state of Florida, we really don't know why. Why in 2015 did we have so many? There were 47 murders or attempted murders that juveniles committed. And so now we're finding ourselves like, okay, what are we going to do? And understand the juvenile system is one of rehabilitation. Ideally, we know that juveniles make mistakes. So we want to direct them on the right path. There's many things that we're focusing on now. Transitions, what we'll probably talk about today. Transitions from residential commitment facilities that are overseen by the Department of Juvenile Justice to the juvenile coming back home again. That's a juvenile that needs terrific alternatives, because if they hang out with the same people that got them into trouble, then all that rehabilitation that the Department of Juvenile Justice is trying to give this juvenile is for nothing.
We need to figure out the environment. The environment that we have in some communities is that we have a large segment of the population who cannot get work. Why cannot they not get work? It's because they've had some brush with the law sometime. They may not even have a conviction on their record, yet that particular interaction is on their record, and good luck trying to get a job. But we don't have the desperation. We don't have the challenges that people have day to day, being able to feed that kid, being able to send that kid to school, even with a small meal. So the challenge that we have is, as we're focusing on addressing the violence and the serious violence that's ending up in a lot of these children being killed, we have got to take a closer look and start fixing Florida law. And my number one fix that I would say is, we need to make Florida law so that if there's no conviction or no adjudication on the case, or even no withhold of adjudication, that case should get wiped out from that person's record. 5.5 million criminal records in Florida are not convictions of any kind. They're not an adjudication. They're not a withhold. Those are cases that have been dismissed or by the prosecutor, dismissed by the prosecutor, or the prosecutor took no action on it. So you can imagine that we have a good chunk of those people in this community who are having a hard time getting a job.
You know, we have, Do the Right Thing program. We have DARE. We have GREAT. We have Police Explorers, of which I am an alumni of. I grew up probably 5 blocks away from here. We have, school resource officers. We have PAL. We have a lot of programs to engage youth. That youth is not the issue. That youth is already engaged. That youth is already looking for other alternatives other than hanging out on the street. What we do a very poor job of as a community is engaging the kids that are at risk. And there has been an explosion of problems and issues directly related to mental health, substance abuse, and we're not directing our social services correctly to address those things. When you see a symptom of, when you see the violence explosion, the homelessness explosion, those are all issues of economics, substance abuse, and mental illness. We, as an agency, as a profession, once we're involved, we're kind of late in the game. Once the violence has happened and we're responding and trying to apply the justice system to a problem, we're late. It's too late. And I think we need to shift our focus, our finances, our governmental agencies, our non-for-profit agencies towards prevention of what we are seeing on our streets.
In 1 week, we've had 3 shootings, 2 deaths. I'm a member of the governing board of the only charter school in Liberty City. I've been a member for approximately 1 year. In that 1 year, 6 of my kids have been shot, 5 dead. That's from one school. What can we say about the state of affairs? You want to talk about hopelessness? The principal was telling a story the other day during the governing board meeting that as she was driving out, going home, she saw a kid walking the other direction, not towards his house. She pulled over and asked him where he was going. Once he explained to her, he said, "No, you got to go home. You got to go to your house. Let's go." The kid looked at her and said, "Why do you care so much? You know how I'm going to end up just like everybody else." That's hopelessness. That's what we need to change. We have the ability to do it. I've sat here all day listening to all the panels. We have all the resources. We have all the strategies in place, but they're working in silos. We need to grab them and work together to address all these issues. So we know that a strategy to address youth gun violence has 3 elements. One of them is increased effectiveness by law enforcement that deters people from committing crimes. The other one is increased legitimacy by those people in position of authority that makes you want to obey them. And the last one is a robust recommitment to the community values campaign. That's using all the resources and everything that we've talked about all day today to ensure that sanctity of life, respect, and rule of law is adhered to. We have it. We have everything we need to develop this strategy. We just need to work together, and we need to do it yesterday.
It's extremely important that we talk about this and continue to talk about it. We've done some fantastic things in our community in reference to children. Our arrest population has dropped almost 80% for our children since year 2000. But we still are plagued with specific types of heinous violence that we have to really find some solutions to.
As you all have been talking, I'm trying to synthesize the numbers. You mentioned working in silos. You have some numbers that you've thrown out that go like this: 80% arrest population down since 2000. 95 contact shootings have not been solved. And what are you doing to identify them particularly and bring them not only in, but to justice, so that the state attorney isn't faced with cases that then become people out on the street again?
Sure. The issue really becomes a neighborhood issue at that point. We respond to somebody who's been shot, and we try to gather witnesses and statements, and we're getting not the level of cooperation that we would like.
That's what we hear as a no snitch culture.
Correct. And so we have this culture that people will not come forward to identify the person. However, everybody who lives in that neighborhood knows who did it. We know who did it. They know who did it, but we can't put together a case in order to prosecute. And so the issue becomes where it is I take responsibility because we haven't developed the relationships over the years in order to show that we are legitimate enough to protect those folks when they come forward so that we can present a case for prosecution.
There is a real concern about there. You know, people say, well, can you guarantee that there won't be any ramifications from this? After that, I certainly can't. You know, but it's clearly the right thing to do. I mean, we know that the communities have to take back their communities. They must do that. So whatever we can do to protect the witnesses, that's fine. But ultimately, if we're going to have a successful prosecution, we still need them to come forward. So it's going to be a decision. Well, you know, and it's a tough decision. But we're willing to work with and do everything that we can to protect our witnesses. But I know the communities are saying that it can't continue like it is now. I mean, it absolutely can't.
That's one half of the coin, is how that the witness is afraid. I think what Chief Yanis was kind of focusing on, in my opinion, and what I'd like to focus on, are those things that we can change. We cannot really change the fact that a witness will be afraid, that a witness will become known to the defendant and perhaps come under a threat. But I think what we can change and what we should look to change is this culture of not reporting crime, not wanting to be involved. It was very disheartening. I think there was a recent community event where our community leaders, our mentors, were out in the street having direct contact with the youth about how you shouldn't change it from, you have to change your mentality from snitching to actually it's helping. So the fact that somebody knows and is out there and these crimes remain unsolved, that's where I would like to see the efforts come, not in necessarily a witness protection bill, because you can take steps to protect witnesses, and we kind of do this on our own by not releasing protected information, not releasing maybe full names, but at some point, the Constitution requires that a defendant know who their accusers are.
I think that's a really good, concrete message today, is that that's an actionable step that this community can work on. Public Defender Martinez, I want to talk a little bit, if you would, about juvenile crime versus adult crime. And I know we've been reporting on 15, 16-year-olds who wield AK-47s, who have guns. We look at them, we know, practically speaking, they're kids, and they have kids' brains at a developmental age, mid-teens. But I think it's difficult for the community to wrap their arms around looking at someone like that as a child and want to press for tougher sanctions. And when they do go into the juvenile system, most of them know it very well and know how their 21 days will be up and they can be sprung if they're not charged as an adult. So I guess my question to you is, what actions can be taken, or do you recommend taking, to even the playing field so that the justice system is more individualized to a child who may not be juvenile, and recognize that there are some juveniles that need adult prosecutions or consequences?
Part of the problem that we have is that whole problem of looking at somebody with a firearm as if it's the same person as an adult making the decision. And it's not. All you have to do is look in your neighborhood, and if you have still memory, remember what you were like at that age. And the problem we have right now is the guns are so easily accessible to these kids that you have a really toxic mix. You have an undeveloped brain. You have kids who get into an argument, and I know the chief has been talking a lot about the challenge of social media, and then the next thing you know is, by the way, kids know where the guns are. They know who in the neighborhood has the guns. They know who the friends are. And then next thing you know is you end up with a shooting. What I'm talking about is we started direct filing back in the 90s, actually late 80s.
Direct filing, for anyone who
Challenging-
doesn't know, is directly filing into the adult system.
Directly charging a juvenile, somebody under 18 whose brain is undeveloped, now you're going to become an adult just because you did a crime, just like an adult would. So, wrap your head around that particular topic. But we did that. And we have many studies that have shown the fact that you're transferring kids to adult court causes crime, causes violent crime, and we just keep putting it aside. We just figure out, okay, there they go again. Let's go ahead and direct file more kids instead of trying to figure out what kind of intervention can we have, knowing full well that this kid is not fully developed, knowing full well that the kid needs to be punished, but what can we do that doesn't make this kid somebody worse that's going to come back and kill one of us?
So to just to stay on that, let's make the action now. How does that change? What needs to be done to change that?
That has to change. Number one, move it up to 25, and then figure out what you're going to do with these particular young adults in terms of how are you going to get them to change what they're doing and change the criminal trajectory.
I'm interested to hear a yay or nay from the state attorney's office. Support or not support?
No, not support. But here's
Shocking.
the thing. Yeah, shocking, right. The fact of the matter is there's a big difference between a 17-year-old youth versus a 14 or 15-year-old youth. I mean, listen, I see the juveniles that are coming in, and we absolutely make every effort to give the juvenile the services that they need. Now, even when they commit extremely violent crimes, such as armed robberies, and I'm speaking for Miami-Dade County, we will make an effort to try and rehabilitate them. And most of the time, those will be going to a residential commitment facility that's operated by the Department of Juvenile Justice. However, out of the thousands of cases that are of juveniles that commit crimes in Miami-Dade County, fewer than 100 are sent to adult court. And I can tell you the ones that are sent to adult court are the most serious crimes that we have, or the ones that have been in the system, we've sent them to residential commitment facilities, and they continue to commit crimes. So to me, the solution is not to send juveniles to adult court. And I'm speaking as the prosecutor. We want to try and rehabilitate when possible. We cannot keep murderers, obviously, in juvenile, just because that there's long-term incarceration, and typically we run out of jurisdiction at the age of 19. But the efforts have to be made to see exactly how we can help this juvenile provide the services that they need, and hopefully, because juveniles do make mistakes. I do agree with our public defender that the brains aren't as developed. But again, we have juveniles that are getting into serious trouble, and they're a risk of harm to the public. Now understand, when a juvenile is a risk of harm to the public, it's my responsibility to not only do what's best for the juvenile, but I've got to protect the community. And I cannot, we cannot allow a dangerous juvenile just to be terrorizing the community with violent crimes.
And I'll be real quick. Look, the reality is what you just heard is the same thing that I just told you a second ago. The problem is that we keep boxing in and saying we're not going to do anything differently because these won't accept it, this one won't accept it, and we are looking at that 17-year. And by the way, in Miami-Dade County, the ones that are in adult court, half of the kids who are in adult court, it's because of a firearm offense, and the majority of them is their first offense. It's their first trouble, son of trouble. So when we talk, let's get real. When we talk about who's getting transferred to adult court or who's getting targeted for transfer, most of the transfers are because of the age. The kid is 17, goodbye. So we need to get real and start talking about, we've done it this way for the last 22 years. It hasn't really worked. And, just because we reduced the transfers to 100, where it used to be 1,300 in 1998, doesn't mean that you're doing it right. It just means that you're doing fewer of what you're doing badly.
All right.
So let's fix it.
I wrote that down as a story to do at some point this time. All right, I want to involve Ray Socorro. Your school is on the front lines of training law enforcement, and something that I heard in the last panel I thought was very interesting. Is there a component, new or not, about training future law enforcement to use social media as an investigative tool, because as we've heard, I mean, if you're gonna rule over young people, you got to think like a young person. And so, what is it, if anything, in the curriculum that you teach now deals with using social media to identify trouble, to use it as an investigative tool to track down evidence, and if there is none, should there be?
There should be, and there is some, but very little. When it comes to social media, we do incorporate it in the different investigation type training that there is, whether it's robbery investigation or burglary investigation. That's one of the tools that they have to use to look at social media, but it's targeted. It's targeted when they have a suspect. They try to see. They don't look at all social media to see if anybody is posting something on the specific incident. They have to have a way to go, a road to follow.
When we get a name of somebody who's young as either a victim or a subject, we all know their whole lives from Facebook.
What we have found is obviously, just to state the obvious, there's the gang violence, but there's also the kind of violence that sparks, that's not necessarily gang related, that comes from what occurs in the online world. And the question really is, how do you, when a kid's character is assassinated online, that's how they perceive it. That turns into violence on the street. When you have the equivalent of cyber road rage, that turns into a drive-by shooting on the street. So that is a real effect. I know that as a parent, when my kids were first starting into the social media, I did not understand why they would get so upset over the things that were said to them, about their friend, but this is the reality of the world that we live in now. And I think that we have to target the youth at that stage to give them the tools to respond in a better way than the only way that they feel like they can, because they're young and they're invincible and they think, I can go out and have this confrontation and everything will be okay. So we have found in our mentoring program, and by the way, for any of you who were blessed enough to be able to go between this room and the last room to hear Luther Campbell and Coach Brunson speak, it was an inspiring example of what mentorship can bring. It's one thing for lawyers to go into preschool, into middle school, and the high school, and we have seen some success, but I think we need to get a community-based involvement from mentors that the kids can relate to provide alternatives, because the online reality, I would bet, is a major factor in why we see non-gang violence.
When we grew up, there was no digital connection. What we're seeing now are digital natives. These kids were born into the digital age. They are connected to everybody else in their world via a digital cord. So that is their world, and we're seeing it in a different way because that's not us. We're immigrating into that world now. And so let's shift. Let's talk about the new crop of lawyers, the new crop of policemen that are coming onto the job right now are digital natives. So they will understand much better than any of us how to police and interact in that fashion. But what we're talking about as far as violence is concerned, when we all grew up and there was a schoolyard brawl, we went home and there was a cool-off period. The digital natives don't have a cool-off period, because once, like in the case yesterday, a couple of days ago, once that starts in a physical world and they walk away from that fight, there is continued ratcheting among friends and everybody who's following about who got punked and who got beat and all that, and there is no cool down time. And so that's why the escalation of violence is a concern there. Now, there aren't enough resources, police, anywhere, to be able to monitor everybody's post. It's impossible. However, as a investigative tool, it is valuable at this point. But what needs to happen is families, communities, friends, cousins, neighbors need to be involved in what is being communicated in that digital world.
I'd just like to say this first before I start. There's nothing wrong with our children. Okay, I want everybody to understand that. It's us. We're the problem. So I just want to clarify that before I get started. What we understand is that young people are looking for leadership. They're looking for love. They're looking for something to belong to. And if we don't give that to them in a pro-social, positive manner, they're going to find it in some place that we don't want them to find it. So what you're looking at is, and I'll get into, we talk about the Petri dish. What you're looking at is a population of young people, and I have the data to prove it, that have been traumatized over and over and over again. And we have to understand that. These children are not born with AK-47s in their hands. There's a process. 70% of the children that commit these kind of offenses have some kind of history with the Department of Children and Families. That means that something was going on in that household where they had to come out and try to intervene. And these were babies. So we have to understand that no one wants to be a criminal. No one wants to be, their lifelong wish is to murder another kid that lives down the street or their friend, because that's what's happening. They're killing each other, and they know each other very, very well, the chief said. And we have to understand that we have to do more in the area of prevention. So that's where we come in with this mentoring component. And the mayor asked me, and he said, Morris, what can we do? And I said, sir, it's simple for me. You have to get in there early. You have to identify them early, and you have to get in there with meaningful interventions. And many of these kids, and you'll be surprised, we give them surveys. I'm talking about kids that commit retail theft to those that have committed attempted murder. We give them surveys. What do you want to do with your life? Who inspires you? What kind of profession do you want to be involved in? And many of them say, you know, they give you the football, they give you the basketball, but a lot of them say police officers, firefighters. Okay? So, ding, 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 let's listen to them. As you just said, we need to speak to those that we're talking about serving. So, first thing I did was say, you know, let's get in contact with the fire department. Let's get in I called Chief Kemp. I talked to Chief Darty. I called Chief Giannis. I called Juan Perez. So this is just the beginning of the process. Because if you want, these individuals that you're talking about have had 16 and 17 years of complete hell. I'm being honest with you. I'm not making this up. And so we expect them to be civil and to act like we act. That's not in their process of understanding. Their process of understanding, you do something to me, I've been taught that I got to get you back, because that's what's been done to me. When I spoke up and said, I want this, I got slapped in the face. I got kicked down the stairs. This is the reality of what we see every single day. So when you get down to the nitty-gritty, it's not that difficult. And there's nothing wrong with our children. It's how we address them. So if we want to make real change, and let me tell you, you'd be surprised how many times the door's been slammed in my face, in my division director's face, when we say, hey, can you work with our population of young people? Oh, no. You'd be surprised, because no one wants to work with a problem child. Not many people. There's some of us that do. But what I'm telling you is that that's the whole premise behind what we're trying to do. And the relationship between law enforcement and these kids is static, it's crazy. So what better way to mend that relationship than to put them in their lives at a very early age as now the protectors, as their protectors, not as an adversary. So we got to change those dynamics. And this is the way that we thought of, just one of many, this is just one of many interventions that we're talking about putting in place, that we're going to make happen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I know we have, wow, really great crowd with some questions.
Even if you rehabilitate the child, how would you improve the environment? Like, for example, the school or the neighborhood. Because I believe if you rehabilitate them, then you send them back to the neighborhood, it wouldn't really make a difference because they may likely go back to their old ways.
It's a very, very good question, and it's a great concern that we have. And this is what I mentioned earlier, when we absolutely have the ability to rehabilitate. And I mean, we can work with juveniles and see what their issues are, what services they need. And we send juveniles, some of the deeper end, and juveniles go to residential commitment facilities. So let's say they're rehabilitated there. They were very, very behind in school. They got them caught up. They dealt with their mental health issues, if they had any. They dealt with their substance abuse issues. And then, so they're doing really well in that structured environment in residential commitment. And then they go back exactly to their earlier environment. So that's a problem, because if you socialize with the people that got you in trouble before, if you get back into your gang affiliations, it's all gone. Everything, the months of good work that you've done can be jeopardized in a moment. So what we need to do is, and this is part of the mentoring programs as well, is to give the juveniles that are transitioning back from commitment facilities back into their homes, they need to have assistance. They need to have mentoring programs. And we're even talking about one now. It's called the Youth Advocate Program. It's going to hopefully be a pilot program. There's funding for it now in one of our worst problem areas. And these are respected people that the juvenile is going to look up to. And they're going to provide them 24/7 mentoring services as well as wraparound services. They're going to help them with job placement and job training. So this is a great start. We need to have more mentoring services for these juveniles that we have rehabilitated and that are transitioning back into the homes.
My concern are the following. Jose Marti Park, we have so many drug dealers in there. What that we are doing to protect those who do not want to do crime, but they are surrounded by all these people? Do we all, they are here from the Little Havana, we know are there. And the crimes they are committing, the people are afraid to even report.
There are lots of parks like Jose Marti Park, whether it's Bunch Park, whether it's, any of these other parks. Part of the difficulty in law enforcement's relationship with the community is that we can't always be very open with the things that we're doing because they're ongoing investigations. So my suggestion would be that, and of course I'll take this back to our law enforcement partners, specifically about Jose Marti, but what we need is the community input to let us know where the perceived failures are. Of course, we can't say, oh, we have an operation in that area, it's ongoing, you'll see results in a couple months. We understand that you want to see results now. Both at the state and federal level, we're working with our state and federal law enforcement partners to help solve crime.
We make, in the city of Miami, over 4,000 drug arrests a year. I'm talking sellers, not users. But there is a market that needs to be served, which is the user. And there will be an entrepreneur who will take that spot once we make that arrest. And so the key to that, and I think in your question you framed part of the problem, is that the community is afraid to come forward because you come forward, we arrest Fulanito, and Menganito comes out tomorrow to continue to sell. That's the issue. And so we need consistent cooperation from the community so we can continue to arrest the entrepreneur and to try to use those services. However, there will always be, well, I hope not. It looks to me, in my experience over the last 30 years, that there is a problem that needs to be addressed in the user end that we are not dedicating resources to, We're spending a whole lot of money in incarceration and lawyer salaries and policeman salaries and all that, but we're not addressing the issue of the abuser and the person who has a sickness who needs to use drugs. And without addressing that, we're not going to do it this way.
Excellent. Thank you.
I am a mother of one. I do want to see you guys go literally in the streets, door to door, speaking to our youth, not just talking about it. Get out there and get on their level. I see you guys building a lot of apartment buildings and things like that, but what jobs are you doing? How are you fixing up our streets? What are our buildings looking like? It doesn't look very polite to me. I don't want to move away, but I want to stay here to fix it.
This whole day was dedicated to all the different organizations from all different aspects, from economic development and employment, from the school systems, and the school system from Early Learning Coalition all the way to the universities. All the different organizations that have something to offer the youth. Something other than the streets, other than gangs. And then obviously, this esteemed panel with such lively conversations regarding criminal and juvenile justice. So this is what it's all about, all coming together to make sure that together as one community, we overcome this epidemic. And with that said, Mr. Randall Thrill Hill.
If everyone in here today is not totally disgusted as to what is going on, then you got a problem. You know, I played at the University of Miami. I played for the Miami Dolphins. I was a police officer, deputy sheriff, federal agent. My parents and my surrogate parent, which is Jimmy Johnson, taught me one thing that I have carried with me in life. And that is, all it takes is all you've got. The problem is, we have not given all that we have. And it's time for a change. We are role models. Nobody else is. We are from the youngest to the oldest, male to female. So only thing I'm asking for the community and everyone in this room, it starts here. It's all it takes. It's all you've got. So give me everything that you have to make this community better. This is South Florida. This is 305. We need to take better care of it because it's all we got. And if we don't take care of it, nobody else will.
I was shot back in 2012 when I was 15 years old. From then, my life been pretty crazy. Just this year alone, I just lost 2 more friends. Last year, I think I lost like 3 friends. So for me, I know people want a lot of change to happen, but for me personally, I feel like I can't listen to somebody who never went through what I went through. You gotta know what people going through. You gotta be able to step in somebody else's shoes and know what they doing. You gotta know how they grow up. You gotta know how I feel to just wake up not having no money. You gotta wake up. You gotta know how I feel to just be on the streets. You ain't got no house. You ain't got nothing to go to. You gotta know how I feel to really go through a struggle to try to help somebody else. I grew up with almost being with 30 people every day, and out of all them 30, like 20 of them in jail, like 5 dead, 2 probably selling weed or selling heroin or selling something, and the rest dropped out.
Would you help us then to reach out to that youth and see if we could turn them around?
Me personally, I don't have no problem getting back to my community because that's why I was raised. I was born in California, but I was raised in overtime. So I feel like if you want to help the youth, grab the youth and ask them what's wrong. Ask the youth what's going on, because all the youth ain't bad. Like me, I got shot for probably something I don't even know about. But look at me, I done came out. I'm about to graduate this year. I'm probably one. Violence is everywhere. If you can't change the mindset of somebody, violence gonna still be here to the end.
The problem starts at the home. If the parent can't teach that child morality because they don't have it, then that child is not going to be a darn bit better than they are. But you got to deal with the root in order to make the fruit good. Thank you.
I think the disconnect is how do we get those programs to the areas that it's really needed? And I think that's one of the goals, really. How do we promote these programs? How do we connect that disconnect that exists right now? We're looking at the 5K, walk, run, pedal, whatever it takes, but we're going to bring awareness. We're going to take the walk right through Little Havana, right through Overtown. And the bottom line is that we're going to beat this epidemic. We're going to beat this epidemic. My hashtag, goals, not guns. Goals, not guns. Goals, not guns. Thank you all for coming.